for us to be able to figure out what is true, we have to have a source of truth that's like our anchor.
Cattle Call Podcast. It's episode 2. It's the first interview ever. I'm your host, Isaac Weston, and I am here with my dog, big dog, Robby Flack.
What's going on?
Robby Flack. Okay. So I met Robby a couple years ago, but really got to know him probably about a year ago when I just got done doing a program called Downline. Robby, okay, what is it you do? What is Downline? Real quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. We've been talking about this for a while. I remember us sitting down, getting some smoothies, talking about your podcast that was going to be coming on. So
That's right, man. Yeah, months ago.
It's pretty crazy that it's actually happening. That's awesome. But yeah, so my name's Robby Flack. I'm 34 years old. Living here in Memphis, Tennessee. And yeah, like you said, I work for a ministry called Downline. I'm the Emerging Leaders Director. So I run this program called the Emerging Leaders, which seeks to equip young adults to follow Christ and make disciples of all nations. And yeah, it's awesome. I love it. Just getting to equip people in that stage. I call it your decisive decade, being your 20s. I'm just super passionate about people maximizing their 20s. And I just feel like it builds you into the person you're going to become the rest of your life. So highly critical what you do with your 20s. And so I'm just excited to be able to walk through that early stage of that with people and just seek to equip them.
Cool, man. Okay, so you're in Memphis now. You're not from Memphis. You're from Kansas, right? So
God's country.
Oh, yeah, go Chiefs.
We have
go
that,
Chiefs.
We have that background in common. So, yeah, I grew up in Kansas, a little town called Riley, right outside Manhattan, Kansas. So grew up in a town of about 700 people. Very real country, I guess you could say. You know, we had like a drive-your-tractor to school day at our local high school.
Perfect.
It was awesome. But yeah, then went to Kansas State University for undergrad, and then worked in college ministry for a while at Kansas, University of Kansas, I guess.
Rock chalk.
Yeah. I definitely have a lot of friends from KU now. Still, you know, a diehard K-State fan, but, you know, got a lot of love for KU too. Just the people there. But yeah, then I moved to Memphis after that.
So how long you been in Memphis now?
5 years, since 2015.
Okay.
Yep.
And what brought you to Memphis?
Originally, I moved here to work at Harvest Church to do their college and young adult ministry. So I went on staff there, was doing that for 3 years. And then 2 years ago, had the opportunity to come on staff with Downline. So just finished year 2.
Yeah, year 2 at Downline. That's one I just did. Okay, kind of a quick question for you. Okay, why'd you come to Downline? Like, what about Downline was appealing to you to the point that okay, I'm gonna pursue a position there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, the church Harvest that I was on staff with, when I came on staff, it was about 300 people or so.
At Harvest?
Yeah, okay. Originally it was a fairly recent church plant that was growing, you know, starting to grow pretty quickly. But in 3 years, it went probably, quadrupled in size at least. There's probably 1,500 people. And the college and young adult ministry was just gotten a lot bigger. I felt like I was always seeing new people just coming into the ministry, which was great. I mean, it was growing a ton. I felt like I was able to, you know, be effective there. But what drew me to Downline was the opportunity to walk really closely with about 30 people every year. So go through that whole process of recruiting people into the program, walking with them for a year, like just knowing, like getting to know people's stories, getting to know kind of what makes them tick, the inside and the out of their lives. I just felt like I could be more effective. I felt like I was kind of more wired for that.
Okay.
So just getting to walk with the same 30 people for a year was really exciting to me.
Okay, so what kind of background do you have prior to coming into ministry? I know you graduated from Kansas State with a political science degree?
Yep.
Okay, and then what did you do right after you graduated?
So I graduated in political science and econ. I used to actually be really passionate about politics, wanted to go to D.C. after graduating from K-State, fun fact. I spent a summer in D.C. as a intern for Senator Roberts, which was awesome. I love
Is he still a
DC.
senator?
Yeah, he's still
Okay.
the senior senator from Kansas. And so I did that, and then I actually, my senior year of college was when I really started my relationship with Jesus, and started growing like crazy, and just kind of felt like God was calling me into ministry. I know that looks different for everybody. You know, you hear people talk about their call into ministry. I just felt like I had the opportunity put in front of me to do it. Like people said, hey, this might be something that you could do, that God could use you in. And so I said, hey, why not? So actually my very first thing was I spent a year in India.
Okay, what part of India?
In Hyderabad, India, which is like South Central.
Okay.
It's a city of about 8 million people. And just ministered.
That's like Chicago size.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty huge. And it was awesome. Just got to minister to Hindu college students there for a year. And I think God was doing a lot more in me than through me that year is what I like to say. Just massive growth for me personally. You know, I hadn't been a Christian, like a real, you know, growing for that long. So just grew a ton that year, got a lot of perspective, you know, was way outside my comfort zone the whole year. Just feel like I learned a lot about myself and how I was wired. And then did exactly a year there, and then had the opportunity to do college ministry at KU after that for about 4 years before that.
Okay, so you spent 1 year in India, 4 years in KU, and is that when you came to Harvest down in Memphis?
After that, I got to know a guy, actually the guy that he's the lead pastor of Harvest. He also is the guy that founded Downline back in the day, a guy named Kenan Vaughn.
Sure.
And we just got to know each other. He would come speak at some events that we did for our college ministry, and you know, I'd like drive him to the airport, like we'd eat lunch together or whatever. And then we actually took a trip to Uruguay together back in like 2013.
Just for a quick dinner?
We just went there and we trained people in discipleship and just, you know, spent a week together. And after that, we were that was probably the main thing that got the ball rolling for me to move to Memphis. And Harvest was like just starting at that point. And so 2 years later, I ended up here.
Which is crazy. I didn't realize that. I'm a member of a different church in Memphis, but I went to Harvest today because we're one of the only ones meeting in person, and went to the second service. And even with the mask mandate and everything spread out and then doing a whole different system, the place is still halfway full. So I've always pictured it as just being some big church.
Yeah.
When you say it was 300 people, I'm like, that's almost like one of those small churches you see off the side of the road. It's 300 people. So it's crazy to see the way that Harvest has blown up in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, when I first got there, they were still doing like I was like a every other week potluck, and like everyone in the church could just stick around, and we just like throw up tables and everybody ate together. But that ended shortly thereafter, just numbers wise. But yeah, I mean, it's grown a ton in I think 7 years that it's been around.
Great. Okay, so I know you have a wife, and you have a daughter.
Yep, my wife's name's Chelsea. We just celebrated our 3rd anniversary.
Congratulations.
We got married in 2017. It hasn't been that long. And we have an 8-month-old named Libby.
The Lipster, man.
She's awesome.
Good old Lipster.
Yeah, she's super cute. I mean, all she really does is just be cute all day and eat and sleep.
I will say, because everyone thinks their baby is cute, and I hate to say it, a lot of the times they're not as cute. Of course, the parents are going to see it in a whole different light than a stranger. But coming from like someone who's not a parent, like you do have a cute kid.
Hey,
I will say.
I mean,
my mom thinks
argue.
it's cute. Like everyone else thinks it's cute. Libby's a cute girl. Chelsea spent 5 years in India, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny because she actually spent 5 years in India, same city, same team that I was on, but I was there a little bit before her, so we didn't actually overlap at all in India. We kind of knew each other, just being a part of the same ministry and mutual friends and stuff. But yeah, so it didn't overlap at all. And then so after I moved home, she moved to India, spent 5 years there, came back, was just living in Dallas, and then
Is she from Dallas?
She's from she grew up in Plano.
Okay.
And so after I learned she had moved home for good, I called up one of her friends and just asked if she was dating anybody, and she wasn't. So
you called her friend?
I called her up, and I wanted to know if she was dating anybody and if she was moving home, for good. So both of those were good answers for me. And then I called her up and said, "Hey, can I drive down to Dallas and take you out?" And so I drove down a couple weeks later.
Were you in Lawrence at the time?
I was
Kansas?
in Memphis.
Oh, you were in Memphis already.
Yeah. So I drove 7 hours to Dallas and took her out, and then we hung out all weekend and kept doing that for a few months. We only dated for about 4.5 months, got engaged.
How long was your engagement?
About another 4 months. So we were under 9 total, which was great. But we had known each other for a while. Like we'd kind of not been real good friends, but had been, definitely had a lot of mutual friends, had talked several times, longer conversations. But I mean, we were not good friends at all, but had just kind of ran in the same circles.
So she was pregnant with Libby longer than y'all were together and not married.
Yeah, exactly.
That is wild. That is so quick.
Pretty crazy.
Man. Okay. So she's in Dallas. You're in Memphis. How much longer before she moves to Memphis?
Well, I mean, right when she moved here when we got married, so she had like been here. She probably visited 2 or 3 times when we dated.
Wow.
Because mainly I was going to Dallas, but she just moved here. Didn't really know anybody. We just started doing life together. I mean, marriage was definitely a challenge at first. I think just with both of us, kind of having our lives set up, and probably a lot of that me not doing a great job of trying to love her well through the transition and stuff. But we just 3 years, we feel like we've grown a ton. I feel like it's been probably the most sanctifying thing in my life.
Really?
More than anything else, definitely.
Like even by design, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously how it's set up. That's one of the big purposes of marriage, obviously. But, it's definitely been true for me.
Okay, so now we're kind of moving into the next section. So we're talking about Chelsea. So what does Chelsea do now? I know she's a mom, but like what does she do for work? What was she doing when she got here to Memphis? Like what's kind of her area of expertise?
Yeah, so she doesn't work, obviously she was in ministry before and she doesn't work in ministry now. She does a couple different things, but she works in social media for a dental office here, PDG. She loves that. She's just really good at social media. She has her own blog called Chai with Chelsea, where she kind of does a lot of the same things. That's like kind of a passion we have, I think, is just discipling younger people, like seeking to bring truth to especially people in their early 20s, college, early 20s, that age group. So she loves that. And honestly, she just loves being a mom and being able to stay home with Chelsea. I mean, we're definitely blessed for her to be able to do that. Mostly, she works kind of from home. She nannies for a couple families. That was good. It kind of taught her how to be a mom before she was a mom.
Right.
So
nice
that's
practice run, and if you mess it up, it's not your kids.
Yeah, so. Definitely was huge. Like, just getting that practice round with other people's kids. But I would definitely recommend that for any ladies looking to learn how to be a mom.
Is nanny, you're saying?
Yeah. Nanny for somebody and just get some experience.
Cool, man. Okay. So she's doing all the social media and stuff. You do downline. What else are you involved in? What do y'all do together as a couple? What do you do personally? I know you're into hunting. I'll give a quick background.
Yep.
And getting into photography, doing that whole side of things. Now you're into podcasting. Look at this.
Hey,
you're into podcasting now.
Check it off the list.
Yeah, do some real estate. Okay, so what all are you involved in now?
Yeah, well, my wife has a bunch of nicknames for me, and one of her nicknames is Hobby Robby.
Hobby Robby,
so
sure.
She always tells me I have way too many hobbies. So love hunting. I'm passionate about that. It's probably one of my main things, like my main like hobby outside of everything else that I'm doing. But yeah, other than that, I've gotten into photography, so I love combining hunting and photography. That's awesome. But yeah, real estate on the side. We have a few rental houses that is somewhat of a time commitment. But doing that, and then honestly, besides that, a lot of it just comes down to just being available, like for people, and I love spending time with people and doing that and starting other ministries. I love being able to combine like things that I'm passionate about, like I said, hunting and photography. I love combining, things like hunting. I love hunting and I love ministry. So me and some friends actually got together and we started like a waterfowl. Waterfowl hunting is the main type of hunting that I'm into.
What is water? I know what it is, but for people listening, what is waterfowl hunting?
So that means basically anything with wings that flies and that migrates. So
that's not a bird of prey.
Mainly ducks and geese at this point, and maybe some sandhill cranes in there too if you're lucky. But yeah, primarily ducks in this part of the country, and geese, along with that.
And have you always been involved with hunting and just outdoors, or is that something that you kind of acquired later in life?
Actually, yeah, it's been kind of later in life. So my dad wasn't a huge hunter growing up, but pretty much after some in college, but mainly after college, when I was in Kansas in Lawrence, just having friends that did it. I started tagging along with them.
Right.
And I had a couple guys that were like really into it. And then they took me, and I mean, pretty much from day one, it was like game over. I was hooked. Like, I was into it.
Yeah.
The early mornings, cold temperatures, like that scares a lot of people off. To me, that was just like, man, this is challenging.
Yeah,
like,
that's part of it, man. Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about the brand you and some buddies started.
Yeah.
Are there other Christian hunters?
Yep. So me and some guys from kind of around the country, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Tennessee, we wanted to combine like, following Christ, making disciples with waterfowl hunting. So we started this thing called More Than a Calling, and have just tried to make it like a platform where we can equip waterfowl hunters that are Christians to be able to like share their faith and disciple people with waterfowl hunting. So I just, love combining things that I'm passionate about, and then like finding other people that do that and building relationships. That's something to me that's pretty exciting.
Okay, so what is something like hunting? I think about with sports. One thing that sports does, whether you are a big athletic person or not, is it does teach you something about life. And so like, what's one of those things that like hunting, that's taught either you or your group More Than a Calling? I mean, what's something that hunting's taught you about life that you only learned it through hunting?
Yeah, well, I was trying to think about that, because I was trying to think, why do I love hunting so much? Because I really love it. It's like one of the best things that I do, just throughout the year. But I look forward to it probably more than anything else. But I think it's the challenge of it. I think it's the idea of just a pursuit. I think, especially us as guys, women included, but especially guys, I think are built to like be challenged by things, to grow in things, to pursue something, to like have to plan and prepare and then execute. And like, so I think a lot of it for me, hunting is that it teaches me to like, fight through, things that are hard, be willing to do hard things to see it pay off. And I think one of the other things is hunting just puts me in a lot of beautiful places. A lot of times it's like away from everything else, like isolated, where I can have a clear head. I can think about, whatever. I can spend time with God out there. And then just the relationship idea of it. For me, one of the coolest things about hunting is I get to spend time with a bunch of guys. I might be able to spend time for 5-6 hours in a duck blind in a truck with a guy. And, you're not going to be able to recreate that just by getting coffee with somebody.
Right.
So it's like you're doing an experience together. You're spending a ton of time together. You have this shared experience, and you just get to know somebody so well by sitting in a duck blind together. Yeah. As we've gotten to do this past year.
Yeah.
Together,
First time I ever gone hunting was with Robbie. So
yeah. I think you shot your first duck with me, right?
That's right, man.
On that trip.
Yeah. Oh man.
We went over to Arkansas and shot a couple ducks.
Oh man. And it's cold. Mm-hmm. It's crazy because at 40 degrees, that's cold for anything else in life. But I know when we started doing it more, like, dude, 40 degrees is a nice warm morning. Mm-hmm. That's going to be exciting. And it is a cool spot because across that marsh is a nice bald eagle's nest up in that tree line. So when you're out there for 4 or 5 hours, oh man, the eagles would the mom would leave and go hunt and come back, and then the dad would leave and go hunt. And you just watched them, and you don't have to like America or eagles, but man, there's something cool about it. And I remember, I think it was John Bryson. He's another pastor in the area, but we were talking about authentic manhood, authentic womanhood through our downline classes this year. And the quote that's always stuck with me, and I've told a lot of guys as I've been home working this summer, is like men bond like shoulder to shoulder and women bond face to face. And I remember talking about that because well, that just sounds like a fancy like saying you put up on a wall. I don't know what that means. Mm-hmm. You're saying how, women love sitting down, like curling up in a chair, grabbing coffee, talking to each other, just looking at each other, talking, but men love doing. Mm-hmm. And I think about those bonding experiences like I've had with you hunting, or like my dad when we work on cars, or even my girlfriend's dad, we'll go kayak fishing. And just in those, like, okay, the way that men are wired, the way men are designed is we just like to do things, and you get closer doing that way. Mm-hmm. And so it really is cool that you guys have capitalized on being able to use hunting as a means to like mentor,
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that with other things. Like I love working out with guys, or playing basketball, or hiking. You can do that with a ton of different things. For me, that hunting is just a way to capitalize on that, and probably my favorite one. Man,
so has there been anybody, it doesn't have to be just hunting, but since we're kind of talking about investing in the next generation, who would you say are some of the people that have influenced you the most, whether it is a mentor or just, even someone you never even got to know, but they had an influence on your life? Like who are those people that come to mind for you?
Yeah, I think there's probably like a couple levels of that for me, where one is like the people that maybe I have, most of them I probably haven't even met. A lot of them have lived, in the past a lot. But I feel like I can be impacted by those people, and I can learn a lot by reading biographies or just like hearing other people's thoughts, even from afar. So that's one of the things I love doing is reading, just biographies of guys I respect. So guys like, I'll just throw some out, but like guys like Dawson Trotman, guys like Jim Elliott, Shadow of the Almighty, is his kind of autobiography. Adoniram Judson, like missionaries like him.
Right.
So I just feel like I can learn a lot from them, their life, their thoughts, the way that they like, write and talk about things, and their perseverance and all these things. So I feel like I can be influenced by them. And then there's just, by God's grace, kind of the men that he's placed in my life, even here in Memphis, over the past few years. But, there's been guys like the guy Justin in college that actually led me to Christ and, taught me. He was kind of the first guy to disciple me and teach me how to read the word and memorize it and pray and all that stuff. Like we just kind of did life together, got to live together for a few years. There's my best friend, a guy named David Rogan-Mosier.
Rogan-Mosier?
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah,
but
Rogie.
he lives,
Let's go Rogie. Yeah.
He lives in Austin now, but we've just been super tight. I mean, he's from like you're talking about a shoulder to shoulder level of a guy that, spent a ton of time with, and but just massively influential on me. And just, I think we've probably both grown by having the other person there to like process stuff and do stuff with. And then, obviously, guys here in Memphis. So there's a guy, a retired dentist named Dr. David Libby.
Yeah.
That's been a great mentor for me.
Did you name your daughter after Dr. David Libby?
Actually, yeah.
No kidding?
So
okay.
Funny you say that. Bring it full circle. But yeah, Libby's named after him. And just we really respect him and his wife, and I get to spend a lot of time with him. So I basically retired from being a dentist, and now just like frees his time up to be able to disciple younger guys. And so just we talk about finishing well in life.
Yeah,
that's a goal that I have, is just finishing well, like all the way through, however many years God gives me. But I look at him and I see a guy that's finishing really well. So that's been huge. Kenan, the guy that I mentioned earlier, has been great. He did all of our premarital counseling for Chelsea and I before we got married. And he's just been a great mentor for me in ministry and, in downline, but also just in life and in marriage, and been really awesome just as a friend, like a little bit older than me, but, probably been more influential for Chelsea and I's marriage than probably anybody else. Yeah. So that's been huge.
So, okay. What's been one thing, I hate to limit it to one, but just maybe it's something that you learned about yourself or being a Christian, or even just God, like a whole new side of God. I mean, what's the most valuable thing you've learned from marriage as an institution so far? Because I know you've talked a little bit about it, about the first year was rough. Of course, it's gotten better since, but how you enter into something like marriage with no practice at all. And like you were talking about earlier, how you saw your own shortcomings as a guy and all the stuff you weren't doing well. I mean, what have you seen now that you're on this side of things, of that first year and this side of the whole engagement and stuff? Like, what's been the most valuable thing you've learned about marriage that came through marriage?
Oh, man. So many
Chelsea,
things.
hopefully she'll listen to this too. Hopefully she'll hear like,
she'll probably tell me all the things I forgot. But no,
I just find it funny that you didn't mention that one.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, I've learned a ton of things. I think probably one of the biggest from early on is like the idea of just conflict being actually a really good thing for a relationship. So I never would have thought that earlier. I always thought, conflict bad. Like I'm a guy that retreats. Naturally, I have a retreat mentality when it comes to conflict. So, and then you get put in marriage and there's just a lot of conflict. There's a lot of like rubbing against each other. So a lot of friction sometimes. So just recognizing that can be a good thing, and that anytime you have to figure things out and have to reconcile and swallow your pride and say, hey, I was wrong. Like, will you forgive me? Things like that. Those are just so good for the relationship, for me, obviously, but for the relationship, I think that's one of the ways that you grow closer together. So that'd be one thing, is just viewing conflict as a good thing.
Like appreciating it. Okay.
It sounds harsh, but just the idea that like I'm the problem. Like I think in marriage or in relationships or really in life, I think we're just wired, our selfish wiring as people. We're wired to think everyone else is the problem. Like I'm good, the other person is why things are going wrong. And if in marriage I found, and people have told me this, but like if that's your mentality where everything is always the other person's fault, you're never gonna get through those. You're never gonna grow. You're never gonna be sanctified. You're always just gonna like pick the other person apart. And so just even learning to say, okay, like how am I like the root cause of whatever the issue is? And then like just, letting the other person hopefully is asking the same thing in the marriage, but just kind of coming to the table with anything that is wrong or an issue, just saying like, okay, this starts with me. I'm the issue. How can God use this to, sanctify me or make me more holy, make me more like him through it? So instead of I feel like if I just come selfishly and say like, oh, Chelsea's the issue or whatever, then we're just never going to get through anything.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked before we first started recording about how right now you've been really thinking about this theme of absolute truth versus relative truth, and how that's kind of been this thread through your life right now. I mean, what about it?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's something that I've been thinking about for a while. And just the importance of, I think as a culture and really just, I think you could probably say this for the world in general, but we've just kind of lost the idea of an absolute truth. Like I think most people would say if you polled them, I don't know what the numbers are. I'd probably just be making up statistics, but I'd say probably most people would say that they don't believe in absolute truth. And I think when I look at the culture, when I look at anything that's happening, I just think it's so important for us, and I'm obviously going to look at things through the lens of being a Christian. And so I believe that truth comes from God as it's revealed in his word, that he's revealed truth to us through the Bible. And so I look to God's word as the source of absolute truth, and that's my source for it. And so anything that comes up, whether that be, just the sanctity of human life or, the topic of racism that, has been talked about a lot in our culture right now, I want to first and foremost start with the Bible as that source of absolute truth. So I was thinking about it like an analogy for that. And, if you've ever been to the beach and like you're swimming in the ocean, especially if you're by yourself, you tend to like drift one way or the other based off how the ocean is taking you.
Not even realize that.
Yeah. So like I was in Destin a couple weeks ago, just swimming out there, just kind of cooling off in the water. And then I looked up, and what's the first thing I do when I look back towards the ocean or back towards the land, the shore, is I try to find where all our stuff is. So like I look for the umbrella that's there, like look for Chelsea, look for, Libby sitting there. And that tells me how far I've drifted away from where I am. And so in a sense, it's like, I don't think we have that source. If you don't have that source of, for us to be able to figure out what is true, we have to have a source of truth that's like our anchor. And I think for most people, they just don't really have that source of truth. And so I think that works in, for a lot of people, because culturally we tend to agree on the same things. But as we move farther away from that, like kind of just Judeo-Christian understanding of, truth coming from the Bible, we're going to get further and further away from having any source of truth. And I think that's going to negatively impact us. And so, I just think whatever topic it is, but that's one of the big things I try to teach people in Downline is first and foremost, if you are going to claim to be a follower of Christ, that our source of truth has to come first and foremost from the Word of God.
Okay, so how do you stuff going on right now? Of course, it's July 19th, 2020. We got, again, I talked about in the monologue, we had an election coming up. We have all the riots and the protests. And of course, the protests started from a good spot. You can see how they've been corrupted. And then there's just a lot of times where people are it's like everybody is acknowledging that something is wrong, but kind of like what you're talking about, how it's never our fault. It's always someone else's fault.
Yeah.
So how do we as Christians, and even as non-Christians, just somebody, okay, people are going to believe truths out there. How do we practically, and you can talk from a Christian standpoint first, of course, but how do we start addressing stuff like, okay, there's a lot of racial tension. I've talked to a lot of black people throughout the last couple of months, and sometimes they don't understand where I'm coming from as like a white Christian, just a white person. But, you know, how can you start to, I don't know, like just mend that gap? And how do you start using the truth and just like little practical applications? Okay, how can we start to help make things better? That makes sense?
Yeah.
How do we start taking that truth? I know it's $1 million question.
Yeah.
But I mean, so how do we start taking this truth and what we believe, whether you're a Christian or not? And what are some practical steps we can start doing? Because you work in a diverse field. You work in ministry where people come from all over the world to work and serve, and they, you know, go across the world for missions.
Yeah.
They come move here to do downline. How do you start saying, okay, everyone's going to have their own understanding. How can we start bringing this together and finding that truth and start to, you know, bridge that gap?
Yeah. And when you start, you know, when you think about, okay, what's the answer to that, or what, you know, what's the practical way forward? I mean, I think those are tough questions. Probably just different depending on what answers, you know, what questions you're asking. But I mean, the nice thing as it relates, you know, especially to truth, you know, and this wouldn't apply to someone that's not a Christian, but I think especially just in the circles that I run in, diversity in the Christian circles.
Right.
The great thing is that with anyone I'm talking to or sitting down with, if I'm talking to another Christian, I know that we should, at least in principle, have the Word of God like as the foundation for anything that we're saying. And so it's nice because we're able to kind of put away anything. You know, we bring our experiences and how we're wired to the table, but we have the foundation there of everything that we say should come from the truth of God's Word. But just really like our identity, I think a real practical thing is like remembering that our identity as followers of Christ is first and foremost as a Christian, before it's a husband, father, you know, black person, white person, man, woman. It's I'm a Christian first, and then I'm all of those things after that. And so I think if we remember that and we kind of have that at the forefront of our head, and in these conversations, as it relates to, you know, race or the sanctity of human life or anything like that, we're able to kind of start a conversation from, you know, the same place. Whereas if I'm talking to somebody just off the street that doesn't believe, you know, in God or something like that, we're just not going to be able to have that same common ground. So I'm not going to expect them to be able to like really engage. Like we might be able to have a good conversation, but we're not going to have that same starting point of truth.
Right. Which goes back to the whole dilemma of the absolute versus relative.
Yeah, and I think you see it with things like, you know, take something like Black Lives Matter, for instance. That phrase, Black Lives Matter, is to a Christian, like that's unequivocally true.
Right.
Big words, but that's absolutely true.
Right.
And it's because in Genesis 1, we see all people are created in God's image.
Right, absolutely.
And I love just, you know, the idea that gives every single human being equal worth and elevated worth, you know, above all other created things. And that's equally true for every single human being, regardless of skin color. And so we like, you know, radically affirm that sentence or the phrase, you know, Black Lives Matter. But then I think it also, we have to, you know, also be real honest with what else does that imply based off of what does the movement stand for and things like that. So if that movement is also then going to stand for, let's say, promoting abortion, well, on the same grounds that, you know, same reason that Black Lives Matter is the same reason that I believe that an unborn child also matters.
Right.
And it's coming from the exact same, you know, place, which is the Word of God. And so I want to equally stand for both of those things, but I'm not going to stand for one and then not for the other, if that makes sense, just because a movement is kind of like, you know, going to stand up for, you know, is going to promote the equality of black people. But then if they're not going to stand for the equality of either the unborn child, you know, that to me is like there's no source of truth there. It's just whatever they're passionate about at the time.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. But. No, I mean, it's just, it's a tough time to be living in. It's a great time. I don't know, just kind of like last question before we wrap up. I mean, what's something we can be doing as Christians especially we were talking about, of course, you know, as Christians, we'll have that common ground. But, and kind of like the goal of the podcast I talk about is, man, reaching people who aren't like us and start reaching that common ground. What's something that we as Christians can be doing better, especially in times like right now where there's a lot of the racial tensions, a lot of the stuff where people are looking at a lot of history, they're looking at a lot of the systems we have set up now, the different institutions, whether it's, you know, reinforcing their beliefs or not. There's a lot of like this I don't know. It's just there's nothing like aligned anymore. It's like you start believing this one thing and you can't be fully aligned with that, because then you have to be like you're talking about, like this. I believe that up until this point. Now I don't believe that anymore. So people are all looking around, they're searching. How can we as Christians like step in practically and start like doing a better job of meeting people there that are trying to, start to align with things again?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think as just a couple things that I've, at least tried to do since, even since moving to Memphis. So real quick, but just with my background growing up in rural Kansas, I didn't have a real diverse, racially diverse area that I grew up in. And even it was probably just till I moved to Memphis before I had like exposure to racially diverse people and areas in a city, which has been awesome. And so I think one of the biggest things for me is I've been able to benefit from having a diverse group of friends and just people that I've had relationship with. Through whether that's through Harvest or through Downline, just been able to like become friends with a lot of people that have vastly different backgrounds and experiences with me, and I've tried to seek those people out to learn from them. So there's a guy that's a pastor in town named Vincent Joplin. That's been huge for me because I've learned a ton from him. He's, given me tours of the college that he went to, Lemoyne Owen, and talked to me a lot about the history. I have, just guys like him and others that I've been able to learn a lot from, which has been huge. And they've been able to point out maybe some blind spots for me, because I only have one set of experiences. So I just say have a diverse group of friends and mentors that you learn from, and you're humble about saying, hey, I don't know. And like I was just able to be honest and say, hey, I've never had exposure to these conversations. I need you to help me out. And those guys have been very gracious in doing that for me. And then I think just what we can do as a whole is just pursue diverse community. So we try to do that with Downline. We try to have our emerging leader classes be diverse, so that people bring a wide variety of experiences and thoughts and beliefs into the program, and we're all exposing each other to those. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that. And I think ultimately the goal is, Downline's a parachurch, but even talking about the local church, is that we'd be a place that where the gospel is proclaimed through a diverse group of people loving each other really well. And I think God is glorified through that, talks about that, and how one day heaven's going to be this incredibly diverse place where we're all just praising Jesus for all of eternity. And so trying to image that a little bit here on earth by making our churches diverse. And I just love the idea, every year I get excited about our new Downline classes, because you see this group come together. And I love thinking that the only thing that's bringing these people together, the world will never do this, but the only thing bringing these people together is the gospel. And, we'll be singing, songs together in worship. And it's just cool because it's a picture of heaven, and where, the gospel is the only thing that we come together with, and then we're able to form friendships and influence one another and learn how to love each other, even though we have different backgrounds. So I'd say just pursue a community like that, wherever that is, ideally through your local church.
Lastly, okay, you just mentioned it before we go. What's the gospel?
Yeah. Well, I think the gospel, I like to use the 4 words of God, man, Christ, response. That's probably the easiest way that I know it to be, but where God is holy and he's perfect and he's also just, and we as human beings are sinful. We were created holy, but we sinned and we rebelled against God. So we rightfully deserve the punishment for our sin. But God stepped in, and Christ paid the penalty for us on the cross. And then we respond to that with repentance and faith. And that's how someone can come back into relationship with God.
That's perfect, man. Robby,
there you go.
Where can people keep up with what you're doing? You talk about more than a calling. You're doing real estate, you're doing Downline, you're doing hunting, you're doing photography. Where can people learn more about Downline? Where can they learn more about more than a calling? Where can they learn more about Robby Flack? Let's hear it.
Oh, yeah. So Downline has a website, downlineministries.com. And we can equip anybody from, 8 to 80. If you want to learn the Bible, come check us out. We have a lot of resources, and we have an institute, and we obviously have the Emerging Leader program. And And then, yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. I love doing photography stuff. It's mostly hunting stuff. So if you're cool with that, then
Yeah, that's true.
Love
Couple
that.
baby pictures.
And yeah, here and there.
Yeah.
And then More Than a Calling, we have a website. We're on Instagram. We actually have a book that's a collection of waterfowl themed devotionals.
Oh, that's cool.
That we put together. So yeah, just trying to get resources out there. But that's kind of it for me.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on, Robby. First guest ever.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
It's awesome. The nice thing about it is, you know, you can bring me on. You kind of have a low bar for everybody else, so no pressure on anybody coming after me.
I got to bring some rock star on now.
Yeah.
And all right, just go between these two right here.
Yeah. But yeah, it was an honor to be on. I'm excited you're doing this, and I'm looking forward to many interviews to come from you.
Dude, likewise. Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for listening in. Hopefully this will be up ASAP, and we'll have some more cool guests coming. Again, I'm Isaac Weston. That was Robby Flack. And I will see you on the other side.